Alrighty, welcome everyone to session one of the Intensive English Language Exam Acceleration Program. So, when it comes to the masterclass of Inglang and the philosophy, we really want to understand the conceptual requirements that Vika has of us, what they want from us. And a lot of students around this topic might have confusion, even if they are great writers, and then they'll still miss the mark. So we want to gain greater scope on the actual mechanics of writing sections A, B, and C. And if you join the program late, that's absolutely okay. You will still gain access to all the recordings and all the notes. That obviously just comes with purchasing the package for the program. But if you complete, the first session or the first two sessions as part of some sort of trial agreement, then of course the remaining recordings will not be made available. Beautiful. So I'm going to move my screen back to the slides and we're going to move through step by step. So, the path. And today, the masterclass, a general masterclass of English language and philosophy. So, really, we're learning what you're meant to depict. Now, this class is a class that I've given to Bowen High, Melbourne High, and it's in works to be given at MLC and Camberwell Girls. This is a masterclass that has helped many students. So I really want you guys to focus up. Um, and I'll really just be showing you in very simple terms and in very almost informal terms why Inglang is just stating the obvious. All you're doing is stating the obvious. So this is a bit about me. Now, yep, I'm a second year med student at Monash University. I do many things. So my personal tutoring experience and teaching style, I've worked with over 800 Inglang students. I work with like 160 for a week just with Inglang Pro. I've tutored for over 2,000 hours now. I'm probably tutoring for 10 hours today. And I've led one of the most successful UCAT cohorts across both 2023 and 2024 in terms of mean score. I do medical interview training. I do a variety of things. I do English tutoring from year 7 to 10 in a very unique 50-week program that I've created. And I've improved Inglang stack results from D to A plus in the matter of 3 lessons. I really need you guys to listen to me. So I teach very simple and minimal. I focus deeply on showing you guys how each and every one of you can write masterfully. And I do this by focusing on serious application. So a lot of this is going to be me putting myself in the driver's seat to quite literally walk you through exactly what I'd be looking for in any type of transcript, right? What type of meta language I'm specifically prioritizing, how I'm prioritizing it, when I'm prioritizing it. And in terms of a vague outline, now I'm moving this around and I have actually already changed this. So it's not going to be exactly like it's written here. I've condensed the 4 AC sessions between 6 and 9 to 2 ACs. And I've put more focus on identity and attitudes as part of essays for lessons 8 and 9. So it's a long 10 lessons, but it will fly by quickly. Last year, by the end of it, man, my students from my program last year, it was a really good year. They couldn't believe that it went so fast. And I just have this slide so you guys see what I get up to in my own time. So let's get into it. What they don't tell you about Inglang and why it's actually really easy. And that is because all it is stating the obvious. So if I were to use the words, I hate you, right? Let's say, just, on a very basic scale, I just said, I hate you, right? There's two realities in which that could be taken, right? If we're not friends in that relationship, in that context, I would threaten your positive face needs of being liked. That would be a social purpose or a purpose or an intent of mine. But you, if we are friends, oh, suddenly that's laughing funny, ha ha, right? Because of the relationship, because of the context, because I identified my audience better, because I built that rapport, because I closed that social distance, right? It ushers laughter. Yeah, so that's all obvious, right? And the purpose of these lessons is for me to condense a year's worth of England into 20 hours. But before we get to that, how would Sapanta write about that? Simple interaction in an exam. So, given Sapanta is presenting to a group of young, attentive students in an exam masterclass, they're likely keen on listening due to the opt-in nature of the masterclass. This leads Sapanta to take advantage of the respect in place for him using the expletive verb phrase, I hate you. And this allows Sapanta to produce humor, build rapport, and produce an overt image of relatability with teenagers who may respect someone who takes risks in this likely serious setting. Notice how I just twisted these three words and I moved through, I identified my audience, I identified my context, and that is all formulaic. You can repeat that over and over again, right? So really, what an AC is this type of analysis about approximately 14 to 18 different lines or different features that you can find. So exactly what we've just done, multiplied by about 18, puts you in position to get a raw 45 plus. So let's go a step further. How can we make that even better? Let's answer these questions in the middle here, right? This allows Sapanta to produce humor for who, build rapport with who and why, and produce an overt image of relatability with teenagers who may respect someone who takes risks in this likely serious setting. So, if we really think about it, English language and what places difference between you and every other student is the level of nuance that you can display, the level of difference between you and everyone else. So, I might create a new version. I'll say this allows Sapanta to produce humor for the attentive students while retaining their attention, given his end goal is to teach them as best as possible, because that is my end goal. And then with who and why, build rapport with the student. I might say build rapport with the students watching in order for them to trust him and listen to what he's teaching. And this is all we started with. So I want you to really focus on how much we just juiced those three words, right? And it's not about the meta language because we use expletive verb phrase, we use building rapport, we had different social purposes in there, sure. But the meta language was not the focus. The marks came from the analysis. Analysis, depth, and actually talking about what's going on in the text and in that world is the priority. So, no matter what you're given, if it's one word, two words, or three words, or a sentence, or a paragraph that has strategic coherence and cohesion in it, right? It's about making the most of it, right? It's about taking that and running with it and expanding it and essentially using it as like dough that's going to inflate. So the meta language there was just, study design social purposes and exclusive verb phrase. But what did I do? I used the names of the people in that world. I imagined myself in the world of that transcript, and I wrote as specifically and detailed to the world as I could, right? To the world of the transcript. I want you to immerse yourself in the transcript. Actually think about who's there. Where are you, right? Why are people using the language they're using? See, because that's what English language is. Why are people using the language that they're using? That's what it is. So now look at this, guys. Let's go back to this. We've collated all of that with the additional bits that we've added. Hypothetically, if I said, given Sapanta is presenting to a group of young, attentive students at a prestigious school, they're likely keen on listening to the opt-in nature of the masterclass. This leads Sapanta to take advantage. Now, while retaining their attention, given his end goal is to teach them as best as possible. Now look at this, right? Imagine if I just get rid of all of that, and all we have is this little section. This little section, these little additional pieces of description that you can very easily add by immersing yourself in the world of the transcript. This is what separates you from other students. This is how you get graded. This is what they look at. This is what they care about. Because all an AC is why are people talking the way they're talking? What do they want? Who's there? Why does it matter the way they talk? Right? That's what English language is. The whole subject is that. Well, look at this, right? I want you guys to think about this. This allows Sapanta to produce humor for the attentive students. I could have ended the sentence right there. I could have. In fact, I could have said, this allows Sabanta to produce humor, full stop. Or I could have said, this allows Sabanta to produce humor for the attentive students while retaining their attention. I could have ended it there. But instead, I ended it at the end of, given his end goal is to teach them as best as possible. So if it's between you and another student, and you only have that first bit, who's going to get the higher mark, right? And now if there's four students, and one of the students ended their sentence at the end of produce humor, another one ended it at attentive students, another one ended it at retaining their attention, another one ended it as teach them as best as possible. Who is going to get the highest mark? It is obviously going to differentiate you guys. And the highest mark in English language is extremely orderly and subsequently provided, as you can see. So you always go that step further. You always go that layer deeper. And that is what puts you ahead of the exam paper next to you. Why is that? Because the way English language is marked is they take everyone's paper, or every examiner at the end of the year, allegedly, gets around 200 papers to mark. A birdie once told me that they get paid around $8 a paper. With inflation, it might be $10 a paper. If they want to be making $60 an hour, they're probably spending something like 10 minutes per paper, max. But a lot of them want to be making $120 an hour because that would be nice, wouldn't it? So they spend maybe 5 minutes a paper. So in that 5 minutes, these little additional sections is what they look at. Because just from assessing your accession or rather your additional analysis, your depth, your understanding, your scope of that world, they make their decision on who to move left and who to move right. They physically move the papers. A lot of teachers physically lay the papers out on the floor and move them around. And at the end of it, they have marked everyone compared to their batch of 200. So against the 200 kids that you're getting marked against by that one examiner, you're competing with 199 others. So you need to talk to me as if you know something more than 199 other kids. If you want to be in the top 30 or the top 40 of the state, which get above Rule 46. So it's always going that step further. Let me reiterate. It's always going that layer deeper. That is what puts you ahead of the exam paper next to you. Now, there's another focus concept that I want to look at, right? And that is the fact that every single use of language in the world is said with some form of intention, whether you meant for it to happen or not. There is not a moment of language in the world that has no intention. And if you have no intention when you use a certain type of language, your intention was to have no intention while you use that type of language, which in itself is an intention, isn't it? So let me put this in very simple terms for a group of high school students. We're going to use Fortnite V-Bucks to explain this concept, right? So even down to a hi, hello, how are you? You have an interlocutor, you have a receiver, which allows the interlocutor to get what they want, right? So every piece of language we use has some form of end goal, has some form of intention. And that end goal is what the examiners want to see you identify and then explain how that end goal can be achieved through the use of meta language, through the use of that strategic linguistic decision, which has a specific language feature that might be parallelism today, that could be semantic patterning tomorrow. So now let me put it in even more real world terms for high schools. And this one is especially for the girls of the class. It's actually a very female dominated class, this class. I don't think the boys didn't care too much from England Pro. They didn't show up. But you ever had a conversation at recess with someone you think is fake, right? And then you go away and you think, damn, like, why'd they say that like that? Or what were they trying to do? That's crazy. The audacity on that individual. That is literally Ing Lang, but we're just analyzing it. That is literally English language, but we're making it more sophisticated. This little analysis we've got here, damn, why'd they say it like that? What were they trying to do? That's crazy. The audacity on that individual. That's what we're doing in English language. So let's take this even one step further and analyze that. Bianca uses heightened pitch and increased volume in the interrogative. But Emma, didn't you tell me once that you really like Jake? This not only increases the likelihood of her being able to inform as many people as possible regarding the gossip of the friend group, but also achieves her intention of threatening the negative face needs of Emma's privacy in order to embarrass her. What have we just done here, though? We've just stated the obvious. We're not doing anything groundbreaking, are we? But a lot of students don't know how to state the obvious. Your job is to state the obvious. Your job is to take an instance in which you understand the concepts of, an instance in which you hear and you think, hold on, what just happened? And actually depict that using your own words, which needs you to become a more articulate communicator, which needs you to understand English language, right? And that's what they're trying to teach. So in this case, if we go back here, right? Um, Twisha, can you unmute and tell me who's who in this series, based, the names that we had there, Bianca, Emma, or anyone really, whoever unmutes first, I'd love for you to tell me. Explain this little flowchart to me now.
Was it Bianca who said, I thought you always liked James?
Yes, that's
Okay, so she's the interlocutor, and then the receiver would be everyone else hearing. So it'd be Emma and everyone else around Emma.
great.
And then get what they want would be, I guess, to embarrass Emma.
Absolutely. Now, what you've done there that was really good was you separated the receivers. Like you identified that there were multiple receivers, right? Um, so you can actually talk about that from two different perspectives of, hold on a second. Um, on one hand, one of the receivers is meant to be directly Emma, but there is also the co-audience or the secondary audience of the friend group. And so imagine if you show the duality between those different audiences, right? And so showing that duality is what gets you the mark. Now, at this stage, right, that's a very basic outline. It's basic, but it is high level of what analytical commentaries are, or to be honest, what English language actually is, what English language requires you to do. So if you can use the thumbs up button on Zoom to communicate to me, um, if you feel like you have a little bit of a better grasp or a little bit of a better scope, or if you have any questions, I just want to know if you can put it in chat. I'd really appreciate that. Or just feel free to unmute. Now I've got one question. What about subconscious language or non-fluency that deviates from the end goal? That's a great question. Now, there are two streams of things such as non-fluency and subconscious language. And I'm going to move this to the Notion document temporarily just to log this into the notes of today's lesson. Alrighty, guys. Beautiful question, by the way. Thank you. And VU0019, can you please change your name to your full name so that I know who's who? Can you do that now, please? Thank you. So, subconscious language or non-fluency features, right? Which deviate from the end goal. Now, if we think about it, subconscious language or non-fluency features don't necessarily deviate from the end goal unless we're discussing someone who might be medically, I guess, might medically have something like ADHD. In any case, right, non-fluency features are still in pursuit of achieving that person's end goal. Maybe they are just less prepared, right? It is less formal and thus less meticulously pre-planned. It doesn't mean they suddenly don't have an end goal. But you might be able to say, or rather, that you are able to say, non-fluency features in the wrong context if not appropriate, can further an individual from attaining their end goal in a social setting, right? Or their end goal through strategic linguistic decisions, right? And just to recap so far, right? And all of these little side note questions, I always move them to the bottom of the notes, but you guys will be able to access those, no problem, right? Side note, or rather, I'll say miscellaneous questions throughout the session, right? And we'll just make that a little section at the bottom. So far, let's just consolidate. English language equals a bare bone analysis of why language is used, when it's used, by who it's used, and how it's used to achieve the end goal slash intentions, right? To achieve the end goal slash interlocutor's intentions. That is English language in a bare bone kind of setting, in a bare bone sense, right? Now, let's go back to the slides because we've kind of focused on ACs there, right? However, before we go forward, I want to go a little deeper on some more topics that, could be weaved into ACs that could be relevant. So everything relates to everything, right? Social purpose changes the register used, which likely changes with context, the setting, and the people that are there. So notice how all of this is highly interlinked. I want you to think about that. It is highly interlinked. And with that, right, let's have a think. Because if social purpose changes, if the end goal changes, that might change the most relevant register, which might be in combination with a change of setting, with a change of audience. Therefore, that is a change of context. So everything is like a domino effect on everything else in English language. English language is a cascade. It's a domino effect. Everything relies on each other, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So it is really important to always keep in mind that English language is a set of dominoes, right? A cascade, a chain reaction, right? A flowchart, right? By this I mean, if the setting changes, so might the register, so might the audience, so might the purposes and end goals, right? Therefore, it is an extremely complex spiderweb of thoughts, concepts, and ideas. And so you need to depict this spiderweb. It is your job to come in and say, hold on, I know why this language has changed from here to here on this day to this day. Right? Now, let's move back to the slides. Beautiful. So everything relates to everything. So let's go back to this for a second, right? If I just added these two words that represent the register using the highly informal expletive verb phrase, what have I just done? Right? What have we just achieved? So in the same paragraph, not even paragraph, in the same example, the one singular example that I utilized, right? The one line, the three words that we stretched, not only did we hit context, tick, we talked about who, what, where of me presenting today, why I'm presenting, what I'm trying to do, right? We hit social purpose, and now we hit register as well. And all of that came from, two or three words of just one example. So I want everyone to absorb that. I want everyone to take a deep breath, right? Just, take a deep breath right now, or just take a moment to absorb everything, because this is, pretty 45 pretty heavy slides, but very formative. All of these slides are a matter of, increasing your scope, increasing your understanding, right? And if I just visually walk you through it, it's quite, the colors are meant to be memorable for you. So just, if you're on the exam and you just think, okay, wow, Yellow, green moves right, red moves left. I need an extra sentence of analysis there, right? Layers of it being deeper. What is the interlocutor trying to do? And I've made it into things that are quite weird and abstract that allow you guys to remember them and grasp them a little better. But I want to get into a bit more about structure now. Sally says, does social purpose equal purpose? Absolutely. Yes. Now, social purpose as a quoted term has been removed from the study design, but purpose is more than just purpose. It's social, right? So it is still your social purpose, right? Um, but as you can see here, in terms of AC structure, now we call it purpose, intent, and function as a paragraph, right? Got another question. How do we write AC introductions with sit-con factors that doesn't sound like a list? Angelina, I'll absolutely go through that in the lesson that is about ACs. But don't worry. Yes, top to bottom, we're going to be going through how to write an AC. I might even write a whole AC live for you guys, like top to bottom, right? Depending on, what the time is like, depending on how many questions you guys have. So yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry. Um, so in terms of an AC structure, right? Let's conceptually ground ourselves in what an AC needs top to bottom in terms of flow, in terms of availability, right? So a decent AC structure, like with this structure, you can score above Rule 40, right? You can definitely score above Rule 40 with a structure like this. If you have three paragraphs, a nice intro, your paragraphs are surrounding these topics as you move through, and context, of course, includes cultural context. Might also include some factors of discourse and coherence and cohesion, which I normally like to combine it with. Now, a really, really good level or high level AC structure is something like this, where you have your introduction, you have purpose, intent, function, but you still focus on factors of context, register, and tenor. Then your second paragraph, the star of the show is context, but you still have focuses on purpose, intent, function, register, tenor. And then you have register tenor as the main focus, right? With context or purpose, intent, and function as also individual factors there, right? Now, with this, a raw 45 plus is possible, right? But if you're going for a 47 or a 48 or above, really you'll see that every paragraph, in a way, or every example should be kind of relating to everything. And by everything, I mean, a purpose, a factor of context, a factor of register and tenor, whatever it might be, right? And so that links perfectly into a question I've just received in chat from Helen that says, is there a reasoning behind the order of the body paragraphs? Does the order matter? Truth is, the order does not matter, right? And so a top of the state level AC structure is one that is completely fluid. You have three paragraphs. Your topic sentence of that paragraph will have a focus. And your paragraph will have, it will have a focus on purpose, intent, function. But every example will make a subtle reference to all three of some sort of purpose, some sort of contextual factor, and potentially some sort of register or some sort of, holding the floor, passing the floor, discourse strategy, right? But the important part here is the fact that highest level AC structures have multifaceted approaches to each and every example that is analyzed. So we're looking to have examples that are versatile. And it's not about the example you pick, it's about the way that you analyze it. And that's because every example can be twisted to fit every aspect of purpose, context, and register. Now, it is also your job to pick salient factors to use for that example. If that example links more to register than anything else, you need to talk about register first, right after you quote the example. If that paragraph, or if that example, sorry, links the most to a very key contextual factor, that's what you link to first, so on and so forth. Now, that's it for ACs for today. Right? Just want you to have that, that bank of knowledge, that kind of depiction, that kind of mental clarity around it. But in terms of short answer, if you take 5 short answer questions, I want you to think about this, right? Now we're going to look at short answer. Just think about this. if you take five short answer questions, right, and you cut and paste each answer one after another, just take the actual, I mean, just the answers. If you take five answers to five different short answer questions and you squash them together, you just get an AC, don't you? Right? So consider short answer like I just taught ACs. Write it the same as an AC because that's what it is. Just broken up, and they spoon feed you where to look and what features to look for. So think about it, right? If you take the five answers, you cut and paste them, you squash them next to each other, you get an AC. Because an AC is little sections of a transcript that are analyzed and described. So consider short answer like I just taught ACs. It's actually the same as an AC. You write short answer questions like an AC, and the marks come from your level of analysis. Your marks come from accurate meta language. And that links to Fatima's earlier question, right? Around where the marks come from. And so, really, an AC and a short answer are versions of one another. And as I said, Vika likes to build up. They start at short answer. They move to ACs. They move to essays. Short answer is very broken apart. Then they transition into ACs where you kind of build on the concepts of a short answer. Then from an AC, you build on those concepts and you move it to an essay, which is far more societal with no limitations apart from the fact that it just has to be in Australia, right? From this year, there is no transcript. There is nothing that they give you. You create that transcript. So from short answer to AC to essay, all they're doing is giving you more creative freedom, which means it gets a little bit more and more difficult to depict more and more abstract concepts. So when we talk about where the marks come from, in a five-marker short answer question, I recommend you guys, and I need you guys to bring three examples with different meta language from the transcript and accompany each one with different analysis. And that analysis will link to factors of purpose, context, register, function, whatever it might be that links to the use of that language. So out of the five marks, two and a half of the marks, two to three of the marks come from you just quoting three different examples from the transcript with correct meta language, right? That's already two and a half to three of the marks. The remaining marks is just a competition of an AC. It's just who can write the most insightful piece about why that language is used. But the good thing about a short answer is it doesn't need to be so expressive. It can be much more scientific and much more straightforward. And as long as you have three pieces of accurate analysis to go along with the three examples, you can think of it like you've met the requirements for 6 marks. So even if you make two mistakes, you still end up at 4 out of 5, right? Now, in my year, on my exam, I might have been one of the only people in Victoria that got a um, 5 out of 5 on the 5 marker. And I did three examples with three pieces of analysis, right? So what about a 3 and a 4 marker? For both of them, I recommend that you do two examples with two respective pieces of analysis. That should be always one per example. And as for 2 mark questions, I want you guys to do one example with one piece of analysis. And a 1 mark question is normally just an identify question which doesn't need analysis. Just bring up an example with correct meta language quoted with the line number. Now remember, if you forget line numbers, you don't get the mark. I don't care if it's short answer. I don't care if it's analytical commentaries. If you forget line numbers, they cannot give you the mark for that example, for that concept, right? So as for essays, right? Imagine you get to bring in your own pre-prepared. Actually, before I go there, let's just let this soak because another information dump, right? Just take a breather, right? This is really just laying out the mark breakdown and explaining how all an SAQ is an AC, just broken into pieces. You write it the same way, you approach it the same way as I said here in terms of explaining what's going on. My SAQ responses looked similar to this, just a little bit shortened, right? Now Angelina says, how do we write identify answers without it being one sentence? Great question. In fact, what I'll do is in this little intermission between short answer and essays, I'm going to move to our Notion doc and answer these questions. These are really good questions, guys. Thank you. All right. So let's go to the bottom. Now, there is no particular order requirement in AC paragraphs. And guys, in fact, there is no requirement on having any paragraphs. It can all be one huge paragraph or 8 mini paragraphs with no defined or boundaries set on what the paragraphs need to actually be about, right? So if you think about it, English, or rather, something like linguistics at university might just be linguistics university might write an analytical commentary as just a free-flowing set of chronological analysis on a transcript, right? Um, so with no specific structure, it's very fluid, right? ACs are very fluid in terms of requirements, but the structure I provide you guys with allows for adequate encompassing of everything Vika is looking for slash looking to be plugged in, right? Um, so think about that, right? You don't actually need to have a defined structure, but I give you guys that structure, and that's what allows you guys to essentially have a kind of a guaranteed way of including everything that they kind of need in an AC. But as long as you talk about, a variety of purposes, intents, functions, contexts, contextual factors, coherence, cohesion, holding the fort, passing the fort, discourse strategies, register, you'll be fine. You'll get the mark. But if it's in paragraphs, it makes it easier for them to mark you. It makes it easier for them to actually see your writing and different aspects of it. How do I know what is enough for SAQs, especially questions with 3 or more marks? Do I always aim to fill up the lines? Great question, Helen. Great, great, great question. Let's have a think. And we've got another question here and another question here. And I'm going to make the questions themselves red, so then you can find the answers below. Difference between analyze and discuss. That's the next question. Then we've got one more here. Beautiful. So, when it comes to writing identify answers without it being one sentence, so are you talking about identify questions that have more than 1 mark? Because it can be one sentence if it's just identify. You might say, there is parallelism between lines 11 to 14 with the high modal verb phrase, we will, dot, 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 11, 12, 13, 14. It's okay because identify, if it's 1 mark, this is all it will need, right? This is all it will need. Now, how do we know what's enough for SAQs, especially 3+ markers, right? So, one, ensure you quote a line slash an example with accurate meta language, right? This is 1 mark, 1 mark per example, right? Now, how much analysis is enough, right? Think about answering these questions, right? One is, How does this example that I've quoted contribute to the question they've asked me in the STEM? For example, if the question is, you know, discuss the display of identity among the interlocutors, right? I must include at least one to two factors of that person's identity, which is communicated through the example of language quoted, right? So if we think about that, right, how does this example that we've quoted contribute to that question that we've been asked in the STEM? So if the question is to discuss that display of identity among the interlocutors, we must include at least one to two factors of that person's identity, which is communicated through the example of the language that I might have quoted. Now, if you want to just really ensure that everything is set in stone, one step further could be to think, how does this use of language affect, hold relevance to the audience slash setting slash any other contextual factor? So you might say, given that James is presenting, or given that James is conducting an interview, which is nationally broadcasted, it would be expected to outline his experiences and vulnerabilities through such language use. That extra little sentence places difference between you and everyone else. Now, this matters if it's pretty much a five marker because the five markers essentially become an AC paragraph, right? Or half an AC paragraph or so. And the game of a five marker is to stand out from everyone else because they mark them the same way they mark ACs, essentially, right? But good questions, really good questions. Good. That's a nice little break from all of the above. Now let's move. Let's go back here. Essays, right? So you can bring in your own examples into essays, right? Interesting. Interesting, right? But therefore, imagine you get to bring in your own pre-prepared AC transcript into an AC, and you've already analyzed it at home, and you know exactly what it's about and how it's written and everything that it incorporates. So imagine you get to bring in your own pre-prepared AC transcript, which you've already analyzed at home and written about, right? That is what the essay is. The essay is a game of you having essentially memorized a whole transcript's worth of contemporary media examples with relevant analysis, why they're used and how they're used. And that can allow you to therefore essentially come into the essay with pre-prepared blocks of writing. It's like if you went into an AC transcript, but they allowed you to write a practice one at home. That is literally what the essay is. Now, Angelina has said, how do we use stimulus material in the essays? That's a really packed question, but that definitely will be covered in the essay lesson. If we get time, I'll also go through a little bit of that today. But all of my examples were manipulated on the spot. All of them. And I mean every single one. In both my SACs and my exam, I was clever. I had versatile examples that could function bidirectionally or multi-directionally even, regardless of the prompt. So let me show you what I mean by that. So your analysis matters most. Now, the examples should be valid. They should be from 2024, but if you can manipulate the examples you currently have that might be 2023, or if you can manipulate an example that is from 2024, but you just need to change a word for it to fit the new prompt, you can do that as long as it has some presence in public media, right? Because as long as you make sure that you say in July of 2024, that example is essentially valid if it exists in public media in some way, shape, or form. Now, I used my examples across 9 paragraphs and I mixed and matched based on the essay topic given. So, personally, I mean, my style, I really liked using big words. And then I got in trouble because my English teacher told me not every examiner is actually going to know the meaning of all the words you're using, and they don't want to go on Google and search them up. And as we know, because we know how much they get paid to mark these papers allegedly, obviously they're not going to want to waste time going on Google and searching things up, right? They're trying to get paid. So I think that all of you, even though a lot of schools now are saying, oh, you don't need to use linguist quotes, in my opinion, you should use linguist quotes in the exam, right? You can only gain from using linguist quotes, but not having linguist quotes runs the risk of achieving the distaste of an examiner who's a little salty or an examiner who just loves linguist quotes, which they're not uncommon. So make sure you have linguist quotes on your essay in the exam. You can only gain from using them. And as my private students would know with ELP or my Inglang Pro kids, they know that the pattern should be 2 examples per paragraph, which means 6 across your essay, 3 linguist quotes, one per body paragraph, which is 3 per essay, and 1 stimulus material passingly used. 6, 3, 1. So let's look at my writing, guys. I want to look at my writing altogether. And I want you guys to kind of see how I move through topics, how I introduce them, how I explain concepts, how I bring in examples, how I move around it, how I essentially condense, prepare, and synthesize my own writing, because you guys will have to do the same. So, conversely, I might, this is a little section from my writing. This is not a full paragraph. This is maybe half a paragraph. So I might say, conversely, teenagers also desire a simultaneous attainment of respect and acknowledgement from those in positions of authority. For many young people, the context of a classroom determines linguistic boundaries. My friend frequently uses the covert rapport-building interrogative, "What's the haps tonight?" with suffixation haps denoting happenings, non-standard assimilation of the voiceless O phoneme to I in order to inquire about the events that may partake after school in a relatable manner. However, quickly transitioning to the formal essay interrogative, "Yes, miss, thank you. How could I elevate my writing further?" which displays the aspiration to be viewed as overtly respectful and mature, allowing teenagers to construct an identity in a state of flux while retaining in-group membership by manipulating language. Thus, displaying formal teen speak quality, formal teen speak displays qualities of maturity while concealing a desire for in-group validation, which demarcates boundaries by erecting barriers between themselves and others. But if you really think about it, it's not that different to writing an AC. It's the similar concept of adding those layers, that extra depth, showing understanding of context, why we use the language we do, what the end goal or what the intentions are behind using that style of language. Now let's break it down even further, right? Um, so when we look at this piece thus far, right? Um, First of all, I mean, I begin with an adverb, conversely, um, and that's my contrast point, right? Now, I really just want to show that teenagers can be in a state of flux here, right? Now, what do I say? I start with essentially a little mini topic sentence that says teenagers also desire a simultaneous attainment of respect and acknowledgement from those in position of authority. So I'm socially outlining the end goal instantly. I'm bringing the end goal to the front because I want the examiner to know where I'm going with this. If I bring that end goal to the front, examiners will know, okay, I know what I'm about to read. I'm primed, I'm ready. I feel like it'll be comprehensible for me. Then I kind of expand my scope and I add an extra sentence that allows me to further my point. For many young people, the context of a classroom determines linguistic boundaries. So what's the difference here? I very vaguely at the beginning said that, yeah, teenagers want respect and acknowledgement from people in positions of authority, but that's vague. It's waffle because I don't know yet where specifically or who specifically. But now, when I say the context of a classroom, now it makes all of the picture make sense. It fits the whole puzzle together because you understand what I mean by the attainment of respect and acknowledgement from those in positions of authority. Classroom context, teacher and student. Not only that, it determines linguistic boundaries. And boundaries is relevant here because you can't really say anything to any teacher, can you? But let's have a look at my writing. Right further. I straight away introduced the example in this stage of my paragraph. Right. It's an anecdotal one, and I recommend that you have one anecdotal example in your writing, in your essay, but definitely no more than one. Right. Um, Now, my friend frequently uses the covert rapport building interrogative, what's the haps tonight, with suffixation, haps denoting happenings. So what am I doing? I'm really methodically and slowly bringing in adequate meta language, covert rapport building interrogative, right, with suffixation haps denoting happenings, a non-standard assimilation of voiceless o phoneme to I. Notice how much meta language I use, guys, right? But it's accurate meta language that needs to be in accompaniment with examples. Remember, meta language is not what gets you the marks. Meta language is the bare minimum. It's the requirement. It's not what allows you to place difference between you and the rest. Your analysis is what allows that to happen. So covert, rapport building, interrogative, 3. Suffixation, 4. Non-standard, assimilation, 6. Voiceless phoneme, 7. So I use 7 phrases of meta language to explain essentially one, two, three, 4 quotations, which is pretty standard. Now remember, the writing you're seeing is, truth be told, at something like raw 50 level, right? So um, keep in mind that once again, you don't have to use that much meta language if your goal is not 50. You can get away with a whole lot less if you don't want a 50 and you just want above a raw 30 or a raw 35. A raw 40 is going to require, some solid effort, but getting above a raw 30 or 35, you can get away with omitting a lot of this information, right? Um, but the beauty of it is I want to teach you guys at this level so that if you shoot for the stars, at least you'll land on the moon, right? So even if you learn at this level and you may not be able to fully execute on the day, you'll at least get the boost that you could have by having the scope of these concepts, right? Um, Now, notice how I denote my example. And what that means is I say what it means. I explain the definition very briefly, right? Because otherwise, it's just floating in space. Haps means nothing, denoting happenings, briefly denoting happenings, right? And then I explain what's actually happening here in order to inquire about the events that may partake after school in a relatable manner. Now, Samkit asks, would I recommend using meta language from the IPA, such as dental fricative? Samkit, if you can use language from the IPA, you will absolutely shine on the exam. That is a great point that you bring up. Now, let me say this. Hold on a second. Um, I think all of you should be aware of this, right? Absolutely use absolutely use the IPA referencing terminology on the exam if you're going for, raw 45 plus, right? Um, Examiners love phonetic/phonology essay examples because they are rare. They are difficult to discuss, and students do not know how to fully use IPA referencing/IPA terminology. Therefore, absolutely you will stand out and shine in comparison to the pack if you use IPA terminology. Right. Yes, 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 yes. Well done, Samkin. So, back to here, right? Um, Now, when we're looking, right? So I very quite step by step, I explain what it is, what it means. I'm not using any more words than I need to. Events that may partake after school in a relatable manner to relate with one's friends. Now, in this example, I want to bring in a contrast very quickly. And I want to talk about how my friend quickly transitions to formal SAE in yes, miss, thank you. How could I elevate my writing further? Which displays the aspiration to be viewed as overtly respectful and mature. So look at this. Formal, one piece of meta language, SAE, another piece of meta language, interrogative, three. Then aspiration and overtly. I just used five pieces of meta language. But those meta language pieces allow me to have analysis like, being viewed as respectful and mature, right? And the aspiration of that, right? Um, Now, the point being, by the way, look at how his aspirations are a part of his identity. And so, very subtly, on the exam, you need to make hints at the full year of English language learning. And it's really important to understand that the difference between exams and SACs is exams need references to the whole study design from the beginning of the year through to the end. In fact, I'm going to write a little about that into your notes because I think it's very important that you guys have this in your in your bank, right? So, um, the conceptual differences between, or rather, the different conceptual requirements between SACs and exams. Um, between the SACs and the exam in English language 3-4, right? Now, SACs are highly restricted to essentially looking at, we'll say, areas of study, of course. So zooming in on attitudes, identity, register, formal slash informal, um, you know, different purposes, intents, functions, um, one of slash one slash two of. Right. Whereas exams are very much, I guess, exams require you to discuss all of those concepts across your essay and AC, right? So your AC must make mention to the interlocutors' identities, right? Or rather, the interlocutor's identity plus, some form of attitudes towards language, plus, registers, plus different purposes, intents, functions, plus contextual factors, plus things like overt slash covert norms and prestige. Now, do we know the difference between overt norms, overt prestige, covert norms, covert prestige? No. Okay. So let me explain, right? Very important to know the difference. Covert and overt, right? Now, when I think covert, um, it's really important to think of that as covert equals cover, right? So covert equals cover, cover equals, for me, undercover, right? And so undercover, think about it, right? So covert equals cover, which is like undercover, which is kind of like secret agent, which is secret equals private setting. So covert is a more private, low-key setting, right? Right, a covert setting. is a more private low-key setting, whereas overt equals over equals umbrella equals you might say on the outside equals visible to everyone equals public setting. So an overt setting is a is in the public domain. So let's say covert setting, overt setting. But just think of it like this, right? Right. Because cover and over, right? Remember that. Now, norms is different to prestige. Norms are expectations of a given setting, right? So I'll do it like this. Covert setting equals covert equals cover. Overt setting equals overt equals over equals umbrella. Norms are expectations of a given setting, right? Slash what is normal in that given environment. Prestige is the respect an individual is given in in a certain setting, right? So let's think about that. Norms are the expectations of a given setting, like what is normal in that given environment. Prestige is the respect that an individual is given in that certain setting. So if you really think about it, if you abide by covert norms in a covert setting, you achieve respect of those people, of the people in that setting, respect of the people in that setting. So now you have covert prestige. Does that make sense? If you abide by overt norms in an overt setting, you achieve the respect of the people in that setting. So now you have overt prestige. However, think about this. If you function in a covert in an overt setting, as you would in a more private covert setting, right? For example, saying things that are unhinged or prejudicial, which may be respected in some covert settings, in public, right? Which you say in public, which you accidentally might say in public, you absolutely do not receive overt prestige, right? So think about that. Does that make sense? So essentially, if you abide by the norms of a given setting, which can be covert slash overt, you attain the prestige of those people, which can be covert slash overt prestige. Does that make sense, everyone? And you need to mention covert and overt pretty much at least once. I mean, ideally just once in your essays and your AC on the exam. They're important words to mention. And trust me on that. Like if, come on, like I'll know. Please, just listen to me on that, please. Now, Twisha says, are we allowed to have a whole paragraph on identity for our AC? So my teacher said, if it's applicable, we can. If you have a whole paragraph on identity as the topic sentence, you need to make sure that your examples still link to factors of context like setting, audience, function, field, register, different purposes, different registers, whatever it might be, right? Different contextual factors, right? So yes, you can have a paragraph on identity. Remember, there's no rules on what the paragraphs have to be about, but there are rules on everything that you need to cover by the end of the AC. The amount of examples you should have probably analyzed by the end of the AC, the level of depth of your analysis on each example you choose to analyze by the end of the AC, right? Now, I've also got a question from Laura. Could I go through how to analyze a phonetic and phonology example in an essay, maybe in another lesson? Absolutely, I can. I'll just put that down the bottom to make sure that I include it in there for you guys. Now, Absolutely. Yeah. Are we allowed to have a whole paragraph on identity? For our OC, as my teacher said, if it's applicable, we can. Remember, there are no rules on what your paragraphs need to be about. But if you choose to do a whole paragraph on identity, make sure each and every example ultimately still links to register, contextual factors, and purposes, intents, or some sort of function. Purpose slash intent slash function. Beautiful. Alrighty. Nice. Good questions. You guys are quite proactive. Well done. Well done. Well done. Well done. Alrighty. Now, let's go back to the slide. So, when we look at this writing, um, we're going to move forward. Now I'm going to ask myself, okay, so there's a few questions you need to ask yourself when you analyze an example in an essay. You have to ask yourself, what does it have to do with the prompt? How does it affect the audience? Why is that language used? Wow, isn't that so similar to an AC? So essays and ACs, you need to go in there thinking that they are very similar in the way that you analyze them if you want to perform at your optimum level. So essays allow teenagers to construct an identity in a state of flux while retaining a group membership by manipulating language, right? And so I'm explaining that their identity is very malleable, and at the same time, they want to still keep their friends. That's why they manipulate their language. And that's something that's quite unique to teenagers because of their age, right? Now, let's think about this. Ultimately, this is how I wrap it all together. This is my link. This is me at the end of it saying, okay, so how do I actually put the bow tie on this gift box? I'll say, thus displaying formal teen speak and how it displays this, these qualities of maturity while concealing a desire for in-group validation that demarcates boundaries by erecting barriers between others. Now, I've chopped this up quite a lot, right? And I've really kind of, broken down the sentences and taken out some of the determinants so you can see it kind of line by line, right? Thus, displaying how formal teens speak. What does it do? I'm going to ask myself, and I'm going to link it back to the main topic that I had at the beginning, the topic sentence that I laid out, the space qualities of maturity. Remember when I said we also, want to come across as mature and attain the validation of those in positions of authority, while concealing a desire for in-group validation. Right. Concealing a desire for in-group validation. In-group again. Demarcating boundaries. Okay, so there's also now an out-group by erecting barriers between others. Right, so language is extremely exclusionary. Right. So notice how it's just like writing an AC. It's the same concept of layers and extra depth that show understanding of the context. That's all it is. You have layers, you explain, you ask yourself the same questions, you bring in examples that have a year and a month attached to them if they're contemporary media examples, and then you get into it. You have a topic sentence that has a main focus, you link it all back together. Now, an AC doesn't really have a link, so it's a little easier than an essay. It's a little bit more fluid, it's a little more free form. And that's why, once again, Vika builds up to the essay, right? The exam builds up to the essay. The essay is the ultimate showing of your capabilities in terms of on a societal scale. The AC is the ultimate showing of your capabilities of analyzing an intimate conversation or something on a smaller scale. SAQ is your best opportunity to show how pragmatic you are and how concisely you can communicate as much as possible. So they're slightly different competitions. They're all the same swimming race, but it might be the backstroke, 100 meter, 50 meter, 200 meter, right? So, it's the same type of stroke. It's the same race with different requirements, philosophies, different preparation. But it's ultimately the same motion that you do when you swim backstroke. Now, you have to use the words of the prompt in your essay a lot. right? We can essentially use the words of the prompt to make anything pre-prepared look fresh and on the spot if done well enough. But let's move to something else that I want to show you guys. Um, that's pretty much it for essays. Now, um, the next thing I want to show you guys is how you can actually basically rewrite even your ACs before seeing the transcript. ACs, not essays. Yes, yes, you read that right. ACs, the one with the transcript that you apparently cannot pre-prepare. So in year 12, I created something called Lego piece modules, right? Look at this. Emphatic stress is used on line whatever to emphasize the importance of whatever is, might be specific to the text, to also reinforce to the reader or the audience the extent of importance of whatever's being talked about, right? So in the yellow, you quote the example with the line number. In the blue, you think, okay, how can I immerse myself in the world of the transcript? What are the names of these people? Who are they? What are they trying to achieve? What are their intentions? Right? And then here, the extent of importance of whatever's being talked about, right? And that might be specific to a footy match in a transcript. It could be specific to the Olympics in the transcript. Now, I did this for so many things, like this, like this, like this. And I'm going to give all of this to you guys today. So you guys can have these Lego piece modules. You can use these in short answer, ACs, and depending on the contemporary example, some of them are applicable to your essays. And you guys will have access to all of this from today's lesson. Um, Beautiful. Um, Now, that's it for the slideshow as such, in terms of ACs, essays, short answer, and the general philosophy of what Vika is kind of looking for and what they want from you guys. So, can you guys just tell me in chat, like, how you feel, if there's any questions you still have? Can I have, is there something that was cleared up for you that previously was uncleared? Just consolidate. Tell me in chat. I want everyone to put something in chat that they might be confused about or something that they picked up on, or in general, if you feel better or worse about English language, right? Do you feel like you have more direction, a little more guidance, a little bit more structure, a little bit more scope? How do we feel? Have a bit of a think. Um, Laura says definitely feeling better. Angeline says can pre-prepare AC answers and some, SAQ analyses. More structure, thanks, King. Feeling better about the structures of ACs. SAQs are definitely a lot more clearer, and the AC structure was very helpful. I'm glad. Good. I mean, I want to clear up concerns. So if you guys have worries or anxieties, say the anxieties equally as loud as the successes, right? Like this is not just a game of, the wins. This is also a game of how we can get you guys to more wins. You really helped me in breaking down how the three are connected with confusion, with covert, overt, prestige, and settings. Beautiful. I'm glad. Because these are very important concepts and they are very much incorporated. Still need more help for ACs. I never know how much to write. I completely understand. What are the most high yield essay paragraph types to prepare? I'll answer that question right now. Great question, Min. Great, great, great question. Feeling better about how ACs should be structured. I'm gonna actually copy both of these. I mean, um, the AC lesson that is coming, maybe it's the third lesson. Let's check. We can have a look here. So the way that I've laid it out is session 3 is the analytical commentary. Session 4 are the mechanics of essay writing. Then short answer, then fleshing out informal ACs, then formal ACs, then attitudes, then identity, and then how to kind of put everything together, approach to the exam, and I'm going to prepare tailored feedback to every student who joins the program. I'll mark one of your essays, and that'll go in here um, for everyone who's going to be a part of the program till the end of it. Um, Beautiful. And with that, Let's go here. And Min's asked a really good question, which I would like to answer. What are the most high yield essay paragraph types to prepare? You mean paragraph types, right? Not essay types, because you don't prepare whole essays, you prepare essay paragraphs in English language. This is a little different to mainstream English. Mainstream English, yes, you prepare whole essays, big chunks. But in English language, you prepare analyses and sections of paragraphs. So, in terms of the paragraph types I recommend you guys to prepare, I think the ones that are very valuable, the ones that I have, definitely one on occupational jargon as part of identity, um, as part of workplace audience context and requirements of establishing expertise and credibility, right? Um, Now, hold on a second. Um, I also recommend some form of paragraph on age-related language, have prepared, right? From the same perspective of the identity and the context, etc., it's quite versatile. I would have a paragraph on egalitarian ideals slash PC language slash overt Australian norms. This might include gender, or rather gender slash sexuality related neologisms, plus or minus, um, person first language surrounding disabilities and things of that nature. I recommend you have an ethnolects phonology focused paragraph, which shows viscerally the Aussie accent that may be combined with subtle, for example, Lebanese, Lebanese nuances, right? Lebanese Aussie accent nuances, right? Something like that, right? Which kind of shows your understanding of phonology. Um, Now, as for alongside that, I think it's important to just, as an emergency, have some, Aboriginal Australian Englishes examples prepared. Um, Now, I also think that it would be nice if you guys had something about euphemisms slash politicians using euphemistic language slash government using euphemistic language, which can be highly manipulative, but also functional slash useful in the real world. I think I think you should also have, hold on a second, that, yes, yes. I also, personally, I had a paragraph on gender related language, which was focused on femininity and masculinity communicated through various advertising. But this is a weak paragraph. I wouldn't want you guys to write about that this year. So I don't really want to put that there. I want to give you guys the highest yield, the best crop. What is that? One, two, three, four, five, six. What else did I have? I had a paragraph on. I think it's important to have something or some form of paragraph that is regarding, you know, Australian accents and phonological variation analysis of that, comparing potential rurality to metropolitan people and broad versus general versus cultivated type concepts. It's always handy to have those types of examples. Um, if you can have this combination of paragraphs, you're pretty much good for anything that they can give you on the exam. Just as a precaution, have a paragraph, the prompts that are really versatile, really widespread, high breadth, and common are things like how does the context slash register requirements slash varying purposes, intents, functions people may have in society affect strategic linguistic decisions? or how do the contexts, the contextual register requirements for, varying, yep, 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 people may have in society affect strategic linguistic decisions. This is a very high yield prompt, right? This prompt, or rather, this sample prompt is a broad, somewhat, I guess this sample prompt is kind of a broad perspective on contextual register requirements, but also uh, a broad prompt that allows you to cover many bases, right? If you can write something that, meets this prompt and, one for just context, one for different registers, right? Actually, I like it when context is orange, I'll make it orange. And one for different purposes, intents, and functions that people may have, which I like that as blue, right? You put yourself in a very strong position. Now, Angelina has asked, what are the best analysis for AC to prepare? Um, Now, also Simran has said, yes, so much was cleared up. Really appreciate how you break down concepts that seem so simple, but really there is so much depth to it. Yeah, there's a lot of depth to it. I mean, we're studying, we're in school, like we're doing academic things. It's always deeper than the surface, right? Like even when you go to uni, I mean, can everyone in chat tell me what they want to do in life? Because I want to associate you guys with, I want to have something to individually know you guys and remember you. Because I want to actually know who you guys are. So if everyone can just tell me in chat, what your like dream job is, or what you want to study in uni next year, or if you don't want to go to uni, what do you want to do, or if you have any major goals. Um, Laura says, could we go about writing about ethanolates? Let me put that down here. Angelina says, make costumes for theater, dentist, science, immunologist. Immunologist, that's dope. Or like pilot. Pilot's cool. Immunology is also cool. Bachelor of Communication Design. Sally wants to be a doctor. Fatima wants to be a pharmacist. Helen wants to do commerce, finance, accounting, economics. Well, Helen, if you care about money, I would be more on the finance side of things as opposed to the accounting side of things. Probably pharmacy or radiology. Radiology, as in like to be a doctor or a radiographer, which is a sort of kind of a nurse role around that. I'd be curious to know. Global challenges. Theater. Theater, costume designer. So you want to be a fashion designer. Very nice. Arif says potentially pharmacy, but not sure yet. Beautiful. Nice, 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 nice. This is good stuff, guys. Thank you for letting me know. Now let's talk through what you should be preparing in terms of examples for ACs. That's not how it kind of works. Look, the way that I would think of it is, right, think about, we're going to go so much more into depth when we actually have the classes on this in whatever, in the coming lessons, but just briefly, right? Think about what each type of transcript could possibly incorporate. It might include, for example, we have informal written, we have informal spoken, we have formal written, we have formal spoken, right? And so we've sorted that out. Now, as part of informal written versus spoken, so if you get an informal spoken transcript, make sure you know how to use the Lego blocks slash have pre-analysis memorized on all the different types of heightened pitch, lowered pitch, volume, right? All of Pitts V, whatever else there might be, intonation. Um, what else is there? What's the S again? Pitts V, yeah, pitch, volume, pitch, intonation, tone. Is it tone or is it tempo? There we go. Tempo. And then we've already got volume. I didn't do it in order, but hold on a second. Hold on a second. We've got volume there. Oh, volume there. Um, Now, it's really important to have analysis ready for these things because in informal spoken, it's definitely going to be there. Now, let me separate this on a one more level even, right? Let's bring these one more forward and let me, hold on, wait. If I go formal, if I go informal, and then if I just bring these one forward, there we go, right? Informal always will have some form of rapport building, some form of closing social distances, functions referentially, or rather mainly phatically plus referentially, um, functions equals phatic, right? Phatic, referentially, etc. You might have different factors of functions. I mean, the six functions that we have, hold on a second, you have phatic, referential, emotive, poetic, metalinguistic, cognitive, right? So in an informal text, if it's, mostly you're definitely going to have phatic and referential. You might, and you'll likely have emotive, and that emotion could be communicated through spoken, right? So emotive function could be communicated through these phonological variations. Now, as for informal, informal written, right? Written may have emojis slash emoticons. Now remember, emojis equals literal Apple emojis, right? Thus, emoticons, which equal something like this, right? Or something like this, right? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, keep that in mind, keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to formal written, right? Huge focus on logical ordering, right? Coherence and cohesion. Whereas formal spoken, right? Obviously, as with anything spoken, as with any spoken transcript, you must have analysis on floor management and discourse strategies, right? And that goes for formal spoken as well, right? Now, in written, huge focus on logical ordering, coherence, and cohesion, right? Here, maybe you can focus on the use of non-standard grammar slash unconventional, unorthodox language use, right? Now, formal written, logical ordering, coherence, and cohesion, slash things like establishing expertise and authority. But once again, things like establishing expertise and authority go for both ends of formal or more serious contexts, whereby social harmony is at the forefront, or standing in solidarity. Which, by the way, all of these things could also find themselves in informal texts, but they are more common, right, in the ones that I've grouped them in. But you can talk about all of this in either direction. It's all bi-directional, right? So huge focus on logical ordering, coherence, and cohesion. As for formal spoken, as with any spoken transcript, you must have analysis on floor management and discourse strategies, right? But anything informal, all formal texts, right? Formal transcripts will normally have passive voice. Will normally have nominalizations, right? And almost always some form of passive voice, right? So if you just know that, then you can go in there knowing, okay, I'm just going to look for passive voice because the analysis is going to be the same every time anyway. You're going to talk about nominalizations and passive voice the same way anyway, regardless, like no matter what the transcript is. If there's going to be passive voice, you're going to use the same words. And then you just extend on it to make it specific to that context. So you bring in the Lego block and you fill in the gaps with immersing yourself in the world of the transcript. That allows you to stand out compared to everyone else with your understanding of the psychology of the situation, the sociology of the situation, right? with why that language is used by that person and why that strategic meta language choice achieves that final end goal, that destination, right? Um, so this is kind of like a little breakdown of what you're looking for, what you should look out for, what you should prepare, so on and so forth. Now, could we go through writing about ethnolex? We will do this in our essay lesson for sure. But briefly, ethnolects focus on harboring in groups within immigrant communities through mutual understanding and a feeling of belonging via language use, via strategic, language use. Can you give an example of something I would contextualize nominalizations or passive voice to show deeper understanding? Absolutely, okay. Right. Now, as for ethnolects, keep that in mind. Um, Ethnolex, once again, it's about harboring in-group within immigrant communities, right? Plus, make sure you use phonetic analysis, such as, assimilation, elision, etc., to describe unique ethnic accents, right? Now, as for this, right, can I give an example of how I would contextualize of how you would? I think that's what you're trying to say, right? So, nominalization, I'll go through this tomorrow, actually. I'll go through what all these words mean tomorrow. We have nominalization, and we also have, here you're talking about passive voice, right? So let's say an example of passive voice is the store was burnt down, right? Now, this is specifically an agentless passive. I'll explain what that means tomorrow, right? Now, as for nominalization, on the other hand, right? It might be any word that is ending with shun. Nominalization itself is actually a nominalization, funnily enough, right? Um, Nominalization. Hold on, I spelled it the same here and here, but here it's got a red line under it. Man, who created Notion, man? These Americans. Too busy eating burgers, bro. Don't even know how to spell nominalization. It's pretty tough. That's pretty bad. Now, in terms of a nominalization, an example of a nominalization could be, I might say, let's just say the indoctrination the indoctrination of the youth let's say the indoctrination of the youth was barred. Now, ironically, I've just created nominalization and passive voice in the same sentence here, right? Nominalization, let's say just indoctrination, and then I'll move this down and I'll bring up a sentence that has nominalization plus passive voice together, which is the indoctrination of the youth was barred, right? Um, Now, how would we actually analyze this? Well, you would say the use of passive voice, and let's give it a line number just for the sake of it, line 12, and we'll make this line 13. The use of passive voice on line 12 in the referential declarative, the indoctrination of the youth was barred, right? We've already got the line number, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Now, I'll say the use of passive voice. Yep, yep, yep. Now, this agentless passive construction in combination with nominalization allows for the concealment of the subject. Um, Therefore, the audience is not made aware as to who conducted this indoctrination of the youth. or rather, who stopped the indoctrination of the youth, rather, as to who barred this indoctrination of the youth. It hides the subject, right? It hides who actually did the crime, right? So this, the indoctrination of the youth was barred. We don't know who barred it. We don't know who the hero is here, right? Indoctrination of the youth means to put thoughts or manipulate or brainwash the youth, right? But it was barred, it was stopped. But we don't know who barred it. And maybe that's purposeful in this setting, right? Therefore, the audience is not made aware as to who barred this indoctrination of the youth. This may be, this may be in order to abide by the privacy and negative face needs of the subject. And we might say, given that this is a nationally broadcasted news segment, right? Think about that of the subject, right? So look at that. This little section as to who barred this indoctrination of the youth, that is what gives us the deeper understanding, right? Now let's go one step further, right? Nominalization removes focus from the individual action of indoctrinating someone to the abstract concept of indoctrination, which once again, which depersonalizes this magnanimous event. Hold on. This is sus. Magnanimous? There we go. Magnanimous. What the? Okay, magnanimous is with an I. Sorry, guys. Which depersonalizes this magnanimous event by placing a greater emphasis. We might say the indoctrination was barred on the fact that the youth was saved rather than the hero of of this event, or rather the hero of this situation, right? The hero of this, rather than the hero that saved them. So this is really what carries us across the line, right? And also the fact that it's a nationally broadcasted news segment. So if you really think about it, right, the game of the AC is to be able to speak about things on an extra level of depth, with an extra understanding of the social structure, with an extra understanding of when we talk about the indoctrination of the youth, what are we actually talking about here, right? Or, what does the nominalization achieve? Instead of saying indoctrinating, we say indoctrination. Whoa, we're moving from the individual action of indoctrinating to the concept, the holistic concept of indoctrination. It's much more formal. It heightens the register. So, in fact, we could even say heightened register through nominalization removes focus from the individual action of indoctrinating someone. We'll put a comma. This needs a break here to the abstract concept of indoctrination. Another full stop, even. This depersonalizes. This depersonalizes the magnanimous event, right? So now look at this. We've also just analyzed two very important aspects of meta language here. Passive voice. We've got referential and we've got declarative. And in fact, if I were you, I would say agentless passive voice because we don't know who the subject is. So the secret agent is not made aware. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now, agentless passive constructing, actually, we've said it there, so it's okay. Right. And also we've got nominalization here. And not only that, hold on a second, we've also got subject, which is a piece of meta language because it's a part of subject, verb, object, and the way that we can structure our sentences. Min, does this help? Does this broaden your understanding of how to write? Do you better understand it now? I think this is really helpful for everyone to actually pick up on of what we've just done live together. Beautiful. So at this stage, I want to walk you guys through a VK exam. Now, this is a VK exam that has been converted purely for our purposes by the wonderful assistant we have at Inglang Pro, one of the heroes behind the scenes. She's an absolute gem. Um, she's converted every exam in the last 20 years to like Google Docs. But that's really helpful because the exams from the last 20 years are no longer available, but Inglang Pro has access to all of them. And we have access to all of them on a Google Docs scale, which is really good. Now, I just want to walk you in the next 12 minutes or so, I want to walk you guys through what the exam looks like, and where you want your focus to be, um, and essentially the concepts around what they ask and how to break it down and how to approach it. Beautiful. Now, if you have any questions along the way, I'm constantly monitoring the Q&A, so ask away, please do. Now, let's start at the top, right? You open the exam, right, straight away. This year it was on the 10th of November. Back in the day, English exams used to be far later in the window. Now they're like 3 weeks earlier. Look at this. You've got a total of 2 hours of writing time and 15 minutes of reading time, right? And obviously, this program is hyper obsessed with the exam. I don't care about sex at all. We're only working with exams here. Now, you open the exam. This is all meaningless without the transcript. So you should automatically go to the transcript first, right? The exam, nothing makes sense without the transcript, right? So in reading time, you look at section A, right? You get a grasp on what's happening. Okay, sure, right? Now, what I personally did is I would go first and foremost to the essay topics. Now, remember, guys, I would always take a watch with me into the exam. I'd put it on the corner of my table and I'd track the hand moving. And I basically knew how many minutes in where I needed to be in my exam. So let me explain, right? I want you guys to better understand exam timing. I'm going to do this once now and once in week 10 before I send you guys off. Sorry, week 5, before I send you guys off a week or so out from your exam. God, I'm so worried, but I'm also really excited for you guys. So, let's go back up here because this is not a Q&A part. Exam timing, right? 15 minutes of reading, right? You have 120 minutes of writing, right? So it's 2 hours and 15 minutes total, right? So 15 minutes of reading, right? One, you go straight to the essay topics and read over them. Think about your pre-prepared examples and paragraphs. Look at the words in the prompt. Assess the stimulus available and think which one would be the most compatible with your preparation. Next, take note of this mentally, right? This should be 3 minutes. Next, the next 3 minutes, go straight to the AC transcript, right? Which is the section B transcript. And break down the blurb and understand the concepts, right? So essentially, list out, or rather, absorb yourself in the world of the passage, right? Absorb yourself in the world of the passage. And also think simultaneously, if you can, with some practice, you'll be able to do this, about the functions, fields, audiences, the register, the main ones, the mode. Think about the setting, the maybe settings, could be multiple, and purposes. Purposes, cultural factors, cultural contextual factors, as well as tenor, right? That's 3 minutes. 3 minutes and 3 minutes. Now, 9 minutes remaining, right? Here, I want you to work backwards, answering SAQ questions from question 5 to question 1. right? Work backwards, answering SAQ questions from question 5 to question 1. Beautiful. So, what do we mean by that? What are we looking for? What are we trying to do here? Right. The point is, a lot of the SAQ questions at the end of SAQ need more thinking time. Reading time equals thinking time. Reading time equals thinking time, right? So we want to do as much thinking as possible in reading time, which is why we attack and answer questions 5 to 1 in our head backwards in reading time as fast as we can. And that's also because question 5 is going to take the longest to prepare, the longest to find, right? Now, 120 minutes of writing. One, as soon as writing time starts, right? Whichever question you're answering in that moment in SAQ in your head, begin writing that question, right? Begin answering that question rather, right? Now, number 2, right? Then work through, then continue moving to answer each question you've already prepared answers to in your head, for which you know where the examples are in the transcript. 3, answer anything else in SAQ. This should be, if you want a 50, if you want a 47 plus, you shouldn't be spending any more than 20 minutes or 22 minutes on short answer, right? Raw 47 plus, let's say raw 48 plus, no more than 22 minutes on SAQ. Raw 50 students can do this in, we'll say raw 50 level students can do this in 15 minutes. Um, but that normally balloons to around 20 minutes on the exam, right? Um, but like at home, before exam time, personally, I was doing SAQs in 15 minutes, no reading time, right? Um, Now, obviously, you're going to have reading time, so I was really, really strict on myself. But then you answer anything else in SAQ. Now, begin writing your AC, right? Ideally, at this stage, you have around, so we'll do it like this. Um, you should have around 100 minutes to go, right? Or something like, minimum 95 minutes to go. That's where I want to get you guys to. You want to have minimum 95 minutes to go, right? 120 minutes to go. Minimum 95 minutes to go. Ideally at this stage, I put the time at the beginning, right? Now, give yourself around, we'll say 45 minutes. Yeah, 45 minutes on your AC. 45 minutes. No, 45 to 47 minutes. We'll, have 2 to 3 minutes to, annotate transcript and vaguely plan, right? Now, at this stage, after you've done that, you should have around, we'll say 45 minutes or so remaining for essay at this stage. 2 to 3 minutes planning max. Really just think about which paragraph's going to have stimulus. Really just figure out which paragraphs you're going to write and which and where the stimulus is going to be located. Right? So 45 minutes or so remaining for the essay at that stage. And really, that should be the end of the exam. 0 minutes left after essay is completed. Full stop. Now, what are my recommendations with practicing SAQs? I did every SAQ I could find from 2008 onwards. I just spammed one in SWAT back for like 3 days in a row. I did like 6 SAQs a day or something, or like five a day for like 15 years worth. So obviously, the more practice you do, the better you're going to perform. The more exams you do, the more feedback you get, the more improvements you make, the better your exam's going to be. It's all in your hands. It's all formulaic. Beautiful. And that officially marks the end of the first session, the masterclass of Inglang, the philosophy, what Vika wants from us, gaining a greater scope on the actual mechanics of writing sections A, B, and C. We can tick that one. Let me just get a tick emoji up, right? And of course, gaining a greater conceptual understanding of what Vika actually wants us to do. Beautiful. Alrighty, guys, I'm going to stop the recording here.